Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, January 28th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 217 days. The game against Michigan in 303 days. Just to give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain before we get started today, there are days when I absolutely know what we're going to talk about in this show, 24 hours, 48 hours in advance or more. And then there are days where it's a little more of a question. Today was going to be one of those days until the very moment Pete Thamel of Yahoo tweeted out the news that the NCAA was close to announcing an end to the recruiting dead period that had been in effect for close to a year now. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop recruiting analyst Alex Gleitman. And Alex, it did not take long after that tweet was sent for me to say, hey, Alex, you want to come on the morning show and talk about it? So before we get into why it's such a big deal and what it actually will mean for Ohio State, can you just first of all sort of explain what a recruiting dead period is and that we've been operating in for like a year now? And also the impact that this one has had on the players in the classes of 2021, 2022, and beyond?
Yeah, in the most simple terms, a dead period just means no in-person contact. That means recruits cannot visit a college campus and meet with a coaching staff. So no unofficial visits, no official visits, as we have seen with the Buckeye Bash in the fall and Rajon Davis most recently this past weekend. A recruit can go to a school's campus, walk around on their own, even be on the phone with a coach and whatnot. But they can't have face-to-face contact with the staff now or go inside the facilities, like anything that the public would not have access to, right? So, a dead period does not mean that, coaches cannot talk to players. They can still text with them. They can still Twitter DM with them. They can call them on the phone. They could do Zoom calls, which is how obviously college coaches around the country have adapted to this elongated dead period. But ultimately, no visits of any kind with in-person contact with the staff, which is obviously a huge puts prospects, I would say, more than anyone at a huge disadvantage. They can't actually go and spend time with the coaches. They can't have arranged meetings with the players, so they can't have a player host that takes them in and shows them around for the weekend like you would on a normal official visit. And it doesn't allow, as we're seeing with JT Tuimoloau, as we'll get to, I'm sure, in a little bit, it doesn't allow guys like that who haven't been to Ohio State to really get a feel of what it's like to be around the players, the coaches, the staff, and really get that feel for a school. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, a dead period, means you can't evaluate prospects in person. And that means no college camps where a lot of guys in the past that have turned out to be very good players for Ohio State, like a Terry McLaurin or a Darren Lee, even Malik Harrison and Thayer Munford, have earned offers to play for Ohio State at Ohio State's camp. Kids do not get that opportunity. So younger kids don't get a chance to get on that recruiting board earlier in the process. They have to kind of wait for film, and a lot of states didn't even have high school seasons this year. It also means that players going into their senior years that are hoping to kind of impress a staff late and earn that camp offer don't get that opportunity. In addition to that, it means coaches can't go out on the road. They can't visit high schools, show that little extra love to recruits they want. They can't go watch them play in person. They can't evaluate any workouts in person. So it puts coaches at a disadvantage because they can't get a true evaluation of certain players. And then I think it puts players at a disadvantage because it doesn't allow them to get all of the offers and opportunities that I think in a normal year they may have been able to get. So again, quite simply, no in-person contact of any time is a dead period. And I think for all the reasons I just mentioned, it truly put both schools from getting to know prospects and being able to actually evaluate them, and then prospects from not being able to visit schools and also maybe not being able to get as many offers as they normally would at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, that's running through that. It's like, I mean, that is a lot. I mean, that is a lot of things that would normally be happening, and none of them have been able to happen for the last year. So, I mean, you hear dead period, and it's like, well, they can still talk on the phone. It's like, well, why is it such a big deal? Like, well, all of those things are where it's a really big deal, and it has had a major, major impact on hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands and thousands of high school seniors who would potentially have a chance to play at the next level, who may not have quite the same opportunity this year for all of the reasons you just outlined. So that may, however, be changing soon-ish. None of this is finalized yet, but Pete Thamel's reporting, and Pete Thamel is generally very plugged in. I know you've had him on your podcast. He is very plugged in at the national level. it looks like, according to what he's reporting, the next step could be the start of what's called a quiet period. So you go from a dead period to a quiet period that could possibly happen as soon as April 16th. So if that happens, explain what a quiet period that is and how that would change things for recruits if and when it does happen.
Yeah, well, it changes things in a big way. A quiet period, again, in the most simple of terms, is in-person contact allowed on campus. So prospects can very simply make visits, both unofficial and official, to Ohio State, which is absolutely huge for obvious reasons. But coaches can still not evaluate players. They can't watch them compete. They can't, go to their high schools. And, in the case of a JT Tuimoloau, they can't make in-home visits. So I think it's I don't want to say half the battle back. It's obviously half of the in-person contact elements there that you do get back. But I think it's more than that the prospects get back because, again, while the staff can't evaluate them playing and things like that, what they can do is get them on campus. We'll see what the rules are because Pete alluded to the fact that there could be some restrictions, and I'm assuming there's probably going to be a limit on number of visitors you can have at a certain time and things along those lines, and certain protocols you're going to have to follow. But Ohio State can have prospects on campus, which is obviously massive in their ability to build relationships with them and kind of close the deal on a number of guys that they feel that all they need is a visit for, especially a lot of out-of-state guys who have never seen Ohio State, in the 2022 class, maybe a little bit of the 2023 class. Get them up to Ohio in Columbus, get them around the staff, get them around the players, and really have a chance to close some big-time recruitments. Now, I will say, the other piece of it is getting to know a kid, and you could do that on Zoom and you could do that on the phone. But sitting down face to face with a kid and his parents and being around them for an entire weekend, it's big for the staff. It's not just about what they do on the field and what they do on tape. It's about what type of people they are, and just kind of dissecting them mentally, physically, spiritually. Do they fit in with the program? Do they have the mental fortitude to be able to take their God-given natural ability and turn it into productivity inside the confines of the program? And so that's going to be big, I think, for sure. And then I think the other thing to note is that last year, or maybe 2 years ago, was they changed the rule where in current juniors in the spring that are going to be seniors, so 2022 kids, can actually take official visits in the spring. And so you might see a flurry of official visits for fear that official visits may end up getting, a dead period could come into effect again. So being able to get those guys on official visits where they can go on the school's dime to all these schools, I think that's going to be a big thing to watch, moving forward, not just getting these junior days, these unofficial visits, but getting the official visits. And you only have so many of those. I forget what the number is. I think it's maybe around 30 or something every cycle. But, getting those in, I think, is going to be really big for the staff and for the players.
And that's obviously mostly for the 2022 guys, 2023 guys. There is one name, and this is a name you have said a couple times already, JT Tuimoloau, who is the 5-star defensive lineman from the state of Washington. He's the 2021 guy who I think he probably did not take a long, if you follow recruiting pretty closely, when you saw this news, that was probably one of the first names you thought of, because he's someone who our team of insiders have been reporting, could end up taking his recruitment past signing day next Wednesday in the hopes of potentially taking visits. Because as you mentioned, he has not been to Ohio State yet. Ohio State's considered the favorite to land his signature. He was just rated the #1 overall player in the class by 247 yesterday. So, this is a pretty big deal. And Ohio State would really, really like to add him to their 2021 class. He's a very quiet guy. He does not talk a lot to recruiting folks. So we don't really know for sure, but I would assume if this is all plays out as we sort of expect, that probably makes it more likely that his recruitment does go into April and maybe beyond, so he can take those visits and kind of make a more informed decision.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with JT. Mark and I spoke about it last week on my podcast Around the Oval. And what we discussed was two scenarios. Was one, well, three scenarios really, depending on what happened with this dead period situation. One was signing next week on February 3rd, which still could happen. He can say, you know what, I want to go to Ohio State. I want to go to Alabama. I know I want to go to Oregon or USC, wherever it may be, Washington, and just sign. And there's no reason to do anything else. Stinks I couldn't take visits, but I'm ready to get this done and put it behind me. What we thought was a strong possibility was him waiting past signing day, maybe until early March, which is when we expected to hear more about the dead period actually ending on April 15th or possibly being extended. So if you wait till early to mid-March and then you say, okay, what's going on here? Does it look like things are going to be extended? Does it look like, this thing actually might end? And then making a decision, okay, I'll wait, I'll take some visits and then I'll make my decision, or I'll just end it now. And so I think if this does go through, and I'll say, as you mentioned, he's not throwing that out there without a pretty good source. He's on the money. So my best bet as of today, which, that could change as with this pandemic, the world's evolving every single day. But on January 28th, right now it looks like I would bank on Pete being right. And if this ends and things open up April 16th, I think it's an even better chance that JT waits because there is light at the end of the tunnel and you can go and take some time. And let's say it's 5 schools even. Washington, he's right there, but 5 schools. Let me take my official visits, boom, 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 and then make a decision by the end of May. I could see that being a very likely scenario. So from what we hear, Ohio State's in the driver's seat. I think signing on the dotted line next week would be most favorable for the Buckeyes. Just sitting here knowing what I know, but having the chance, he's never been to campus. So having the chance to get him on campus and make him even more comfortable with a potential decision to go to Ohio State certainly would be good. But I don't think the coaches would love him going to Tuscaloosa and spending time around Nick Saban and his staff and USC and Oregon and everywhere else. So I think they'd love to just kind of go with what they've got going and get him to sign next week. But we'll see. I think it makes it more likely, though, that he does take visits if this does indeed come to fruition.
Another interesting question is how this might impact when Ohio State could hold its spring game this year. They have not announced that yet. They typically do it second, third Saturday in April, something like that. Well, if this happens on April 16th, and they do open it up to at least a quiet period on April 16th, the second Saturday of April is April 10th. That would be before that during the dead period. The third Saturday of April would be the 17th, which would be after the dead period. So assuming this rule actually does go through, as again, this is not done yet, I would assume that if that rule goes through, that might be something Ohio State takes into account in terms of scheduling that spring game to potentially get folks on campus for spring game weekend.
Yeah, I'd wager, if this was a prop bet, I'd wager a pretty hefty sum of my savings account to the fact that not only Ohio State, but every major college football program, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Oklahomas, every major school that's big in recruiting and in the game for all the big guys would probably move their spring games to either April 17th or April 24th. I would be shocked if this thing, if this thing does look like it's going to happen, that the spring game isn't one of those 2 dates, because why would you not want the opportunity to have recruits at that event? Potentially, I don't know if there would be fans in the stands or anything along those lines, but just to be able to get those guys in the horseshoe and see the guys compete head to head. It's always a great recruiting event, the spring game. I don't think it has the same effect without, 90, 100,000 people in the stands like we've seen on a nice April day before. But I still think it's a huge opportunity for guys to come in and see how they potentially would be used at their positions and how they're featured and what the offense looks like and get the vibe of the stadium and all that stuff. So I think it's very likely to happen. And even, they might as well just make it one of those days right now, because even if there is no visits at that point and things change, it doesn't really hurt you. There's no difference than having it on the 10th and the 3rd.
So that'll take care of the dead period, quiet period, all of that drama. We will probably run through all of this again if and when this does officially get finalized and we have a little more specifics on all of that. But there's another big topic that's just been absolutely lighting up our Ask the Insiders board this week at Buckeye Scoop. That is the possibility that LSU cornerback Elias Ricks might enter the transfer portal. First of all, before we get into any potential impact for likelihood of transfer for him, can you just first share a scouting report on Ricks and where he might fit in with the Ohio State defense if he does enter the transfer portal and he does decide to transfer to Ohio State, where he would fit in for the Buckeyes and just kind of his game overall?
Yeah, I'll preface this by saying I actually like Sevyn Banks and Cameron Brown a lot. I think, especially if Cameron Brown makes a full recovery from his injury, I think those two guys are I don't want to say they're going to be first round picks, but I think they have the potential to be like in that Ohio State line of cornerbacks that get selected really high in the NFL draft. But with all due respect to those guys, Eli Ricks is on another level. He's 6'2", 195 to 200 pound range, but runs, like a deer, can flip his hips. Like if you were going to build a cornerback, it's Eli Ricks. I mean, he's 6'2", as I said, 6'2", almost 200 pounds. He's long, he's rangy, he's quick. I think in high school, I looked at the numbers. It was like a verified 4.2 shuttle and a mid 4.5s 40, which at like the opening, those times are like legit times. So you think about all the NFL guys that run, by the time he runs for the NFL Combine, he'll be a 4.4 guy. So at that size, with that speed and athleticism and just the different measurables he has, athleticism, there's no, and you look at the tape this year, the production he had on the field for LSU. I think he was a freshman All-American in a number of outlets, definitely a freshman all SEC. I don't even know. He might have been all SEC, one of the teams there too. He was, I think, by far their best defensive back this year. Wasn't a great defense, but traditionally they've recruited, very good defensive backs and have recruited very well the last couple of years. And I just think he's a guy who comes in and he would be the number one cornerback on Ohio State. And obviously that's the biggest position of need after watching this year. I think they were very thin at cornerback. Not only would he bolster the depth, but I think he would be the lead guy. I think he'd be that lockdown corner that can help Ohio State play this one high system that they want to be able to play, and bring a lot of versatility, the ability to cover man, play zone, blitz off the corner, tackle in space. So he really brings it all. I see him as a 3-and-out type of guy. So, we'll see what he decides to do. I think he's really conflicted right now. I've heard he wants to leave. His family, who moved from California to Baton Rouge, kind of for him before he got to LSU. I imagine from what I hear as well that they, are trying to get him to actually think about this and not make a rash decision. And so we'll see what happens. I do know, and I reported that he is seriously considering it. It's not just some smoke. And I know Bill Green has followed that up with some reports on the board. You guys should all check that out, kind of confirming those reports. And what we're both hearing is that if he does leave, Ohio State's the most likely destination. So let's get to the point where he actually enters the portal first before we go down that rabbit hole. That's what I've been trying to convey on the boards. Let's see him make the decision to actually leave first, because every year there's freshmen that are disgruntled with playing time, or something wasn't as expected when they were recruited, or they miss home, or all these different factors. And I could probably list off 10 names right now, including maybe even one guy on the team at the current point who's thinking about leaving. The guys before never ended up leaving. This guy may never end up leaving, and so it happens every year with freshmen. Let's see what happens with Eli Ricks. Right now, he seems very disgruntled, and LSU people are telling me it's likely he does leave in their opinions, but let's see what happens. But I would have Ohio State as the leader in the clubhouse if he does decide to make a move.
That certainly sounds like something Ohio State fans might want to keep an eye on, one way or the other. Like you said, maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it goes nowhere, but in terms of potential impact, if he does end up deciding to transfer to Ohio State, that would be a pretty big piece of news for Ohio State. And you can make sure all Buckeye Scoop members have probably been living and dying on the Ask the Insiders board as we keep having new information dripping out every day on that story. This has also been a really good week. You just had a fantastic episode of Around the Oval. Really, you told me who your guest was. I was like, oh man, that's a good one. That's a really good one. So who did you have on your episode of Around the Oval that dropped yesterday?
Yeah, I had Zach Herbstreit, who, if you obviously recognize the last name, son of Kirk Herbstreit, grandson of Jim Herbstreit, two former Buckeye captains. Obviously, Kirk is more well known right now for his role on ESPN on College Game Day, announcing the game of the week on Saturday night on ABC. But yeah, Zach is a senior at Montgomery Bell Academy in Nashville, Tennessee, plays tight end, and was recruited by the Buckeyes as a preferred walk-on. So sat down with Zach, honestly, like couldn't meet a more humble, nice, polite human being and young kid. Every answer was yes, sir, which kind of makes me feel awkward and makes me feel like my dad or something. But no, it's just funny. Like, you know, I remember my earliest memories of Zach Herbstreit were, I think it was the Michigan game in 2006 when they had game day in Columbus. It might have been a Penn State game around that time too, but where, you know, Herbie's all four of his sons, I think it was, he had him on the stage and they were running around as like 1, 2, and 3-year-olds or something like that. And I remember him then, so it made me feel old interviewing him. But yeah, we talked about, you know, how Ohio State started recruiting him and, you know, why he's so excited to be a third generation Buckeye and what he wants to do. You know, a lot of walk-ons, some of them want to get into coaching, some of them just want to play, some of them just are there for the awesome experience, like what he wants to do. And then also just being the son of Kirk. I mean, listen, it can't be easy. Kirk's not a polarizing guy. I just think that like fan bases take sometimes what he says and get really angry at it or get really excited at it. And so there's a lot of emotions involved. So being his son can't always be the easiest thing. And Zach talked about that. And I just think he did an awesome job. And it was really cool to get his perspective on everything. So definitely give it a listen. I thought it was a fun. It's probably only about 12 minutes long. So short, quick listen. And he did a great job.
And there's some other interesting family dynamics there too, because of course his older brothers, twins. Who do his older brothers play for right now?
Yeah, they're playing for Clemson. Ohio State actually didn't recruit them as preferred walk-ons. And I think I read the story, like Urban kind of, for whatever reason, they just missed it. Dabo offered them preferred walk-on opportunities. I think if Urban did, they would have came to Ohio State. But I think by the time Ohio State realized like, oh, you know, we could do this. It was kind of too late and they already had their heart set on Clemson and decided to go to Clemson. So the last couple of years has certainly been interesting in the Herbstreit household with Kirk calling both Ohio State Clemson games in the semifinals. And then Zach being a lifelong massive Ohio State fan, having to decide, do I root for the team I love or do I root for my brothers? And at least it was a win-win situation for him, but we talked about that a little bit. So I thought he had some pretty good answers there.
Yeah, that was a very fun conversation. I will give that one 2 thumbs up. Make sure you check that out. You can find that on all the places you find this. Wherever you listen to this, you can find that. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Spreaker. Wherever you find this, you can find that. You can search for Around the Oval. You could also just search for Buckeye Scoop. That'll get you all of our great podcasts. So make sure you do that. Also, man, we've been talking about it. Like, this has been a crazy week on our Ask the Insiders board. If you listen to Alex talk about Elias Ricks and did not go, man, that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch play out over the next week or two. Like, I don't know what to tell you. That is potentially a very big piece of news and one that our insiders have been all over for quite a while now and kind of providing new information as it comes out basically every day at this point. So make sure you check out BuckeyeScoop.com for all of that. You have to be a member to be on our Ask the Insiders board. It is worth every penny. I can tell you that. It is a fantastic community, a lot of fun, ton of great information on there. And it costs, like, just don't go out for coffee like twice this month. And ta-da, you've paid for it. Make coffee at home and you've paid for your Buckeye Scoop membership right there. So you can find that all at BuckeyeScoop.com. Find all the podcasts, all the places I just said. And thank you guys for joining us today. Alex, thank you for joining me. Always fun having Alex on here. Always a good conversation. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.